This is disc number 2.
Good day, sir.
Poole, I've called for news of Dr. Jekyll. Is he still incapacitated?
I'm afraid so, sir.
May I see him?
I'm afraid not, sir. The master sees no one now. The fact is, I've barely seen him myself these last few days. He spends all his time in the laboratory now. And it's not just that, sir.
No?
It's the notes he leaves. They are most curious in nature.
Curious. How so?
They are most pleading, sir. Either that or rambling and unfathomable. I can't make head or tail of them.
Poole, you're a good fellow. I want you to promise me something.
Yes, sir.
Should anything happen to cause you concern, you must come to me at once. Do you understand?
I will, sir. Thank you, sir. What you say is a great comfort to me.
You know, Addison, someday I shall take myself away from all this.
Really, Enfield? And where will you go?
Oh, I don't know. Somewhere in the country, I imagine. A quiet cottage, perhaps.
I don't believe a word of it.
Why ever not? The fresh air would do me the world of good.
There are two very good reasons I can think of. For one, you enjoy the city life far too much.
And your second?
Who would I have to take my weekly strolls with?
How curious. Our wanderings seem to have taken us to that door again.
Blackmail door, you once called it, didn't you?
Well, at least that story's at an end.
And I, for one, would be glad if we never saw Mr. Hyde again. Did I ever tell you that I saw him once?
No, I can't say you did.
I also had that grim sense of repulsion you described.
It was impossible to see the man without one's stomach tightening.
And how much water has passed since we first spoke of him? Much more than we might have expected.
What a fool you must have thought me, not to know this is a back way to Dr. Jekyll's. No wonder you knew who I was talking about.
You mustn't be so hard on yourself, Enfield. Perhaps it's for the best that I found out when I did.
And how is Jekyll nowadays? You've spoken of him little recently.
I couldn't tell you, though he's most likely but a few yards from where we stand. This very door leads to his laboratory, where he is now.
Then perhaps we should pay him a call.
Truly, there's nothing I'd like more, and I feel certain that seeing a friend would do him good.
Shall I try knocking?
You may, though I fear will yield no joy. His man Poole tells me he's not received a caller in months.
Dr. Jekyll? Are you there? Dr. Jekyll?
It's of no use, cousin.
No, wait, I think I hear something.
Who is it?
Jekyll, is that you? I trust you are feeling better.
I am low, Addison. So very low. Still, it won't last long, thank God.
That's because you stay indoors too much. You should be out taking the air like us.
He's right, you know. Why don't you get your hat and take a quick turn? We needn't go far.
You're both very kind, and I should like that very much, but I'm afraid it's quite out of the question.
But Jekyll, why ever not?
I dare not, you see.
Perhaps we should leave?
No, Addison, I'm so very glad to see you. Indeed, I would like to ask you, Mr. Enfield, in, but the place is not really fit.
Then could we stay on your doorstep and talk a little?
That is just what I was about to suggest. You've no idea how much I've missed the company of old friends. Indeed, I...
Henry, what is it?
Oh, dear God, no. No.
Henry, are you all right?
You must believe me, Addison. There's nothing you can do for me now.
Dear God, the poor man. If only we could help him in some way.
Without more information, there is precious little we can do.
Then we are at a loss.
No, Enfield, there might be a way, but it will mean breaking a promise I always intended to keep. Let your soul forgive me, hasty Lanyon, but I do this for the sake of our friend. And although you've addressed the envelope not to be opened till the death or disappearance of Dr. Henry Jekyll, I cannot wait any longer. Dear me, this will take some reading. Penned on his deathbed, I fear. Now, let me see if I can decipher what Lanyon has to say. It was but a fortnight ago, when the gentle rhythm of my life was interrupted
in such brutal fashion. Late one night I received a letter from Jekyll. My life, my honor, my reason are all at your mercy, it ran. So pleading was its tone that I began to fear for his sanity. And as such, I felt compelled to act upon his wishes and call at his house with the utmost urgency. Lanyon, you're a fool to be running schoolboy errands at your time of life.
Good evening, sir.
And to you, Poole. I'm sorry to call on you at such a late hour.
That's quite all right, Dr. Lanyon. Fact is, I've been expecting you.
Have you indeed?
I received a letter, you see.
From your master, Dr. Jekyll, no doubt.
Yes, that's right.
Well, I also have one, and I must tell you, at first I thought it was some sort of a terrible hoax. It was only when I read it for the second time that I feared it was to be taken seriously.
I quite understand, sir. I also have a most unusual set of instructions.
And they are?
Firstly, I'm to assist you in gaining access to the laboratory.
And what else?
That the utmost secrecy should be employed throughout. I have some bolt cutters, a jemmy, and some candles.
You seem rather well prepared, Poole.
I've had to become accustomed to unusual orders of late. Now there is a back door to the laboratory in the street behind the house. That will save us going through the house and waking the other servants.
What if a constable should happen to pass?
We'll have to do our best to explain ourselves.
And without your master to corroborate her story? It'll mean a night in the cells if we're caught.
Then one of us will have to stand guard. You should act as lookout, sir. I shall do the breaking.
Very well. I can see you mean to go through with it.
Indeed I do, sir.
Then we'd better get it over and done with.
Can you see anyone, Doctor?
No, Poole, it looks all clear. Can't you go any faster, Poole?
I'm trying, sir, but it just won't budge.
Give it here. Here. You just need to put your back into it a little.
We're done, sir. You've done it.
Well, let's get inside. I don't like all this hanging around. Now, I've never seen his laboratory before. I wonder what he cooked up in this. It smells ghastly.
The cabinet is this way, sir.
And that's where he keeps his most important papers?
Yes, I believe so.
Well, my letter states that I, and I alone, am to see its contents.
I quite understand, sir. I shall be by the door if you should need me.
The door of my cabinet is to be opened by pressing the letters E and F on the front. A hidden mechanism, eh? Take out with all of the contents the fourth drawer from the top. Now let's see now. 1, 2, 3. In my extreme state of mind, I have a morbid fear of misdirecting you. But even if I am in error, you may know the right drawer by its contents, namely some powders, a file, and a journal in my handwriting. Aye, that seems right enough. I beg of you to take this drawer exactly as it stands and carry it back to your house in Cavendish Square. Poole?
Yes, Doctor.
I must be going now. Can I leave you to secure this place the best you can?
Of course, sir. I'll see to it at once.
Now I can understand Lanyon's anxiety about running such an errand. It is, after all, unusual, but hardly enough to cause the sudden deterioration that led to his death.
3 o'clock had scarce rung out over London when the knocker sounded gently on the door. I went myself at the summons and found a small man crouching against the pillars of the portico and invited him in. Are you come from Dr. Jekyll, then?
Yes, of course. Who else would I be?
Well, doctors can expect callers at any time.
Never mind that. Have you got it?
Come now, you seem to forget that I have yet to have the pleasure of your acquaintance.
I beg your pardon, Dr. Lanyon. I meant no harm by my eagerness.
Well, that's all right, my good fellow. Why don't you start with your name?
My name is Hyde. Mr. Edward Hyde.
Hyde the murderer?
Some people know me as such.
Then I must fetch the police at once.
Wait! I understand you doctors took an oath to your profession.
Aye, to protect one's patients, but that doesn't mean I should harbor criminals.
Then you may do with me what you like.
Oh, is that right?
But only after we have completed our business. Now, I understood a drawer was to be obtained.
Yes, I have the drawer. It's over on the table here.
Thank heavens you've got it. I'd had thought an old fool like you wouldn't have managed it.
Well, after all I've done, there's no call for insults.
Oh, be quiet, can't you? I need to concentrate. Yes, It's all here. Good. Now, first I must find the file. Then I add the solution. And now the salt crystals. Come on, why won't you dissolve? Yes, yes. See how it turns green? It won't be long now. I must wait. It must be purple before.
Oh, dear God. What is that mixture?
Just wait a little longer. There. It's ready. And now, Lanyon, you must choose.
Choose what, exactly?
Will you be wise, I wonder? Will you allow me to take the glass in my hand and leave your house alone, and without intervention from the authorities?
You seem to forget you're a wanted man, Mr. Hyde.
I see the greed of curiosity has too much command over you.
Must you always speak riddles, damn you?
I'll give you one more chance, my good doctor. And do think hard before you answer. Shall I leave you now none the wiser, or do you choose to witness a new, dark, and dangerous knowledge?
I've done too much tonight to stop now. Whatever it is you have to show me, I wish to see it to the end.
Then you, Lanyon, who've denied the virtues of transcendental medicine and derided your own superiors for so long, will learn the truth. Now, do you see, Lanyon? Do you see what is happening?
For the love of heaven. It can't be! It simply can't be!
Then there followed a cry of such savagery. Hyde reeled and staggered, gasping with open mouth. I leapt back against the wall, my arm raised to shield me from that terror. And that is all? Lanyon's letter is at an end, and I remain none the wiser. What in heaven's name did Lanyon see that turned his mind so? Bless me, Poole, what brings you here? Is the doctor taken ill?
Mr. Addison, there is something wrong, sir. Something most terribly wrong.
Calm yourself. Take a seat by the fire. That's it. Take your time. Tell me what's happened.
You know the doctor's ways, sir, and how he shuts himself up. Well, he's shut up in the laboratory again.
And what of it?
Oh, Mr. Utterson, I'm so afraid.
Yes, I can see that, but you must try and be plain. What exactly are you afraid of?
I've been afraid for more than a week now, and I can't take no more of it.
Come now, Poole. I'm sure you've got some good reason. It's obvious to me that something is seriously amiss. Try and tell me what it is.
I think there's been foul play, Mr. Utterson.
Just what do you mean by that?
I can't say exactly, but will you come with me and see for yourself?
Of course. Let me fetch my coat. I'll be with you in a minute.
Oh, thank you, sir. I can't tell you what a relief it is to hear you say that. God grant there be nothing wrong when we get inside.
Thank you, Mr. Poole.
Yes, Effie, now open the door. Let us in. Told you I'd fetch help, and that's just what I've done.
Bless God, it's you, Mr. Utterson.
Poole, who are these people?
Effie is the housemaid, and Bradshaw's the footman.
Thank heavens you've come, sir. I feel much better now that you've arrived.
Poole, what are all the servants doing here? Don't you think they should be about their business?
You must try not to take them to task, sir. Can't you see? They're all afraid is what it is.
Afraid is right, sir. It ain't right. What's been going on?
On all that's holy it isn't.
That's enough. You tell the rest of the servants to wait in the dining room, then go fetch a candle for me.
Yes, Mr. Poole.
Mr. Addison and I will go out to the laboratory and see what's going on.
You'll be careful, won't you?
We'll have less of that, Effie. Mr. Addison's here now. It'll soon be all right. The door to the laboratory is at the end of this corridor.
And you want us to knock on the door and present ourselves?
Oh, no, sir. I want you to come along as gently as you can. I want you to hear and not be heard, if you get my meaning.
And what if he opens the door and sees me?
I think that's unlikely, sir, but if by any chance he does ask you in, you won't go, will you?
Not if you think it unwise.
I'm afraid I would, sir.
Very well. Let us take up our positions.
Now, sir, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Just listen carefully. Sir, are you there? Sir, may I speak with you?
Is that you, Poole?
Yes, sir.
What is it?
Begging your pardon, but there's a gentleman to see you.
A gentleman? Who is it?
It's Mr. Utterson. He's been asking for you again.
Tell him I can't see anyone. Not a soul, you hear?
Very good, sir. I'll let him know. There. Did you hear, Mr. Utterson?
Yes, of course.
Let's return to the house. We can discuss matters more easily there. Now I ask you, sir, was that my master's voice?
Well, it did seem a little changed.
Changed. With all due respect, I've been butler here for 20 years. I'm hardly likely to be deceived by my master's own voice, am I?
Then what exactly do you suppose has happened to Dr. Jekyll?
Isn't it obvious? The master's been done away with.
Murdered, you mean?
And I know when. It all happened 8 days ago.
And just how can you be so certain?
I heard him cry out. God forgive us, the whole house heard him cry out.
But if your master's been dead these past 8 days, whose voice did we hear?
Whoever it is, they spend much of their time ranting and crying to heaven.
Poole, this is a very strange tale, and a rather wild one at that. And let us suppose for a moment that Dr. Jekyll really had been, well...
Murdered, sir.
Then what on earth could induce the killer to stay? It doesn't make sense.
All I know is that he, or it, or whatever lives in that laboratory, has been crying out for some sort of medicine.
Medicine, you say? Do you know any more than that?
It was sometimes his way, the master's that is, to write his orders on a sheet of paper and place it on the stair. I've had nothing else since last week. Nothing but papers sending me to every chemist in town. And every time I brought the stuff back, there'd be another paper telling me to return it an hour later. Whatever it is, this drug is wanted bad, I can assure you that.
Do you have any of these papers I can see?
One here in my pocket.
Dr. Jekyll assures you that your last sample was quite impure, totally useless for his present purpose. 2 years ago, he purchased a somewhat large quantity from you. He now begs you to search with the most sedulous care, and should any of the same quality be left, to forward it to him at once. Expenses no consideration. The importance of this cannot be exaggerated.
There's more on the back, sir.
For God's sake, you must find me some of the old stock. This is indeed a curious note. How come you opened it, Poole?
I didn't, sir. It was the man at the chemist. He was so angry that he threw it back in my face just like it was a piece of dirt.
Yet the date on the letter says this was written 2 days ago.
That's right, sir.
And this is unquestionably Dr. Jekyll's handwriting.
I thought it looked like it.
Then doesn't this prove he's still alive?
What does handwriting matter? I'll tell you, sir. I've seen him.
Who exactly?
I heard an old clattering and banging from an old storeroom in the garden one night. It fair woke me up, it did, so I got out of bed and I went to take a look. Oh, can't a man get any peace? Be those bleeding cats again. I bet they've been at the rubbish despite all I've told the cook.
Where is it? There must be some left. Dear God, let there be some.
Who's there? Dr. Jekyll, is that you?
Get back, Poole. I said get back.
What in heaven's name are you doing, sir?
What does it look like, you fool? You think I go through my dustbins for pleasure?
If you've lost something, sir, perhaps I could be of assistance.
No, I said get back.
But, sir, I was only trying to...
I said leave me alone. Get out of my sight, do you hear? I never want to see you again.
You make it sound as though he was frightened of you seeing him.
Frightened is exactly right. Well, I didn't like it, so I went back inside to fetch Bradshaw.
And then what happened?
By the time we'd returned, he'd gone back inside his laboratory.
I see. And did you find out what he was doing?
I went back in the morning to take a look. It was the old stock of that drug he was searching for, I'm sure of it.
Poole, these are all very strange circumstances, but I think I can see a light.
Then you believe me, sir?
That he's been murdered?
Yes, sir. I'm sure of it.
No, Poole, I don't. I believe your master has been seized by one of those illnesses that tortures and deforms the sufferer.
But, sir...
Hence the alteration of his voice, and his avoidance of friends. Why else would he want this drug? There is my explanation, and as appalling as it is to consider, it does fit all the facts.
But that thing I saw that night, it wasn't my master. I swear on all that's holy, it wasn't Dr. Jekyll.
Now really, Poole, how can you be so sure?
My master, sir, is a tall, fine man, and this creature was more of a dwarf. Sir, do you really think I don't know my master after 20 years? No, that thing was never Dr. Jekyll. God knows what it was, but it was not Dr. Jekyll.
And you still believe that he's been killed?
I'll stake my life on it.
Poole, You know, if you say that once more, it'll be my duty to make certain of the facts.
Then I say it again. He's been murdered, I tell you.
Then, as much as I desire to spare your master's feelings, I must now consider it my duty to break down that laboratory door.
Yes, Mr. Utterson, that's talking. But I wouldn't have you do it alone.
That's very well said, but it'll cost you your livelihood if you're wrong.
I know, sir, but I love my master, and I mean to see him right.
And whatever happens, I'll make it my business to see you're no loser.
Thank you, Mr. Utterson. I know you've always been kind to me.
And now, we mustn't delay any longer.
No, sir. There's an axe in the kitchen. And here, you might want to take this poker for yourself.
Then you truly think we're about to place ourselves in harm's way?
Sorry to say, but I believe so.
Poole, isn't it better that we're frank with each other?
Sir.
Come now. We both think more than we have said. This figure you saw, did you recognize it?
Well, it was dark and I hardly shone my light on it.
Yes, but did you recognize it?
Do you mean was it Mr. Hyde?
I do.
Then yes, I think it was. It had much the same size and well, there was something else.
Go on.
I don't know if ever you met this Mr. Hyde, sir.
I spoke with him once.
Then you'll know there's something strange about him. Something to make your blood run cold and thin.
I know exactly what you're getting at.
Oh, I know it's not evidence. But a man has his senses, and I give you my Bible word that when I saw him, my spine felt like ice.
Then let our names be vengeance, so we may truly smite this evil from our midst. Pull yourself together, Bradshaw.
Yes, sir, I'll try.
I know you're nervous, but it's our intention to end things tonight. Poole and I are going to force our way into the laboratory, and if all's well, my shoulders are broad enough to take the blame.
And if they aren't right, sir?
Then I shall have to deal with them as I see fit. Now there is a small door around the corner from here.
You mean the back entrance to the laboratory, sir?
Anyone seek to escape, you must be waiting there with a good stick.
I understand, Mr. Utterson.
Good. We'll give you 10 minutes to get to your post.
Very well, sir.
And now, Poole, we must also get to our position.
Sir?
What is it, Poole?
Can you hear him, sir? He walks all day and the better part of the night. It's only when there's a new sample from the chemist that there's a break.
Perhaps it's an ill conscience that cannot rest.
Now, put your heart in your ears, Mr. Utterson, and tell me, is that the doctor's step?
Poole, before we go in, is there anything else you haven't told me?
There is one small point.
Well, out with it, man.
Once, sir, I heard him weeping.
Weeping? What do you mean by that?
It wasn't ordinary crying, Mr. Utterson. No, it was like a woman or a lost soul. For I wept myself that night.
Take heart, Poole. It's nearly at an end. What time have you?
It's near midnight, sir.
Bradshaw will be in place by now. Are you all set?
Yes, sir, I'm ready.
Very well, then. Henry Jekyll! Are you in there? Henry Jekyll, I demand to see you. Jekyll, I give you fair warning. I must and I shall see you, with or without your consent.
Utterson, for God's sake, have mercy.
That's not my master's voice. By all that is good, it's Mr. Hyde's.
Then break down the door, Poole. Break it down at once. Careful now, Poole. We're dealing with a killer. You'd better let me go first.
But, sir...
No buts. Now follow me carefully and keep your wits about you. Jekyll? Are you there? Jekyll, is that you?
Over there, Mr. Utterson. In the old armchair.
Jekyll?
Just look at the pair of you. You're like a couple of church mice who've been caught stealing.
My dear Henry, you look all done in.
I don't have long now, thank heavens.
Is there anything that can be done?
You don't understand. There's nothing I want done. It's finally at an end, and that is truly a blessing.
Henry, what talk is this?
It is the talk of a sound mind.
No, I'll not have it that way. Poole, you must fetch a doctor at once.
Yes, Mr. Utterson, you can rely upon me.
Utterson, it'll do no good. It'll do no good at all.
Come now, is there anything I can do to make you more comfortable?
Believe me, there is nothing I'd like more than for you to just sit with me a while.
Very well, if I can do no more.
Thank you. It's more than I deserve.
More than you deserve. Surely I should be the one apologizing after our unwarranted entry.
Yes, You made fine work of the door.
I'm afraid we let our imaginations get the better of us. You know we had expected... Well, I won't trouble you with that now.
I know what you expected. You still don't understand, do you? Lanyon was just the same. And then he had the shock of his life. I really thought he was going to die then and there.
You were there when Lanyon received his shock? I had no idea.
Oh, I was there all right. Just how much did Lanyon tell you?
He left a letter explaining that Hyde arrived and took some medication.
Ah, but did he say who left his house?
I don't follow.
As you know, I was born to a large fortune, with every guarantee of an honorable and distinguished future.
Henry, why are you telling me this?
You wish to understand, don't you?
Well, yes, of course.
Then as I was saying, the worst of my faults, if any were to be found, was a consistently cheerful disposition. Even at a young age, I found this made those about me happy. But perhaps, as a consequence, I found it hard to show my true emotions, and as I matured, I began to conceal my feelings. Like so many of our ilk, I stood committed to a profound duplicity of life, where any true emotion was locked up, never to be displayed.
Henry, I never heard you say such things before. Even when I first met you, you appeared so very content with your lot.
Why shouldn't I be? To everyone else, I was always Henry Jekyll, the hardest working student in the whole of college. But at night, well, I had the whole of the town to enjoy, didn't I? But you must understand, although I was a double dealer, I was in no sense a hypocrite. Both sides of me were in deadly earnest. I was no more myself when I laid aside restraint and plunged into shame than when I labored in the eye of day at the furtherance of knowledge or the relief of sorrow and suffering. Do you see what I mean, Utterson?
I believe so.
And that is how it would have remained if I hadn't chanced upon the theories of the transcendental.
Those theories from the Far East, I thought they were just nonsense.
That's just what Lanyon said. But it was during these studies that I began to realize the truth. Man is not truly one, Utterson, but truly two.
I'm sorry, I don't follow.
Can't you see that I was not one mind? No. In reality, I was a set of polar twins continually struggling to dominate my body. And if I could only separate the upright twin and allow him to perform the good things, unhindered by the hands of his extraneous evil, how much better life would be.
Yes, but what of the other twin?
He too would be unburdened. He too could live a life without a constant moralistic preaching.
Well, surely this is all fine talk, but nothing more.
But that's where you're wrong. With my theories in place, I then began to approach the problem from the laboratory table. In doing so, I began to perceive the mist-like transience which makes up our being and how certain chemical agents have the power to change that aura.
But Henry, don't you see you're talking about the very sanity of life?
Oh, I didn't rush headlong into matters, no. I hesitated long before I put this theory to the test. For one, I knew that any drug which shakes the very fortress of identity may kill.
It'd take a brave fellow indeed to take the first dose of this medicine of yours.
No, I feel it would have been far braver not to unleash that genie. For it was the temptation of discovery that at last made me overcome my fear. And just a little more reagent. Yes, that should do it. And if I am right, then it should change color. Yes, it's happening. It won't be long now. What a curious brew it is. Although I've made it countless times before. Tonight it looks different. Perhaps it's because I finally mean to go through with it. Nothing. I feel nothing. No. A slight tingling. Nothing more. All my theories, they can't all have been wrong. Dear God, no! Oh! What have I done?
I've done it. I've finally done it. I'm finally free. free at last.
Truly, Utterson, I cannot describe the pain or the agony of the process itself. The grinding of bones and the overwhelming nausea.
Yet you survived.
It was only when I looked into the mirror that I saw him for the first time. I realized what I had done. I can't describe the overwhelming wave of repulsion that I felt as I gazed about that evil leer and those dark, hateful eyes.
You don't mean... You and Hyde...
We are one and the same. There, my dear Utterson. Now do you see the full horror of it all?
I never could have believed. Why, he's barely half your height.
There again I have a theory. The evil inside of my nature was simply less developed than the good. After all, until then my life had been mainly one of virtue and self-control.
But Hyde is truly repugnant. He has an air of evil which is indescribably abhorrent.
Careful, friend. He is never far away. It would not do to provoke him. Let me finish my tale and you will see.
What happened after you'd made your discovery?
Almost at once I began to fear that the process was irreversible, so I prepared the draft immediately.
And you became Henry Jekyll once more.
And seemingly without any consequence. Perhaps that was the problem. I sometimes wondered if the change had been more difficult.
I don't understand.
Well, that night I'd come to the fatal crossroads. Until then I approached my discovery with a somewhat noble spirit. I told myself I'd risk the experiment for the betterment of mankind.
You mean you began to look for personal gain?
I had yet to conquer my fear of a dry life of study. I was not ready to face the life of virtuous and elderly gentlemen.
And you fell into temptation.
I had but to drink the cup to assume, like a new skin, the face of Edward Hyde. I remember, at the time, the possibilities seemed almost comical. Here I had the chance to live the best of both worlds.
But surely there was danger, too.
Undoubtedly. And I made my preparations with the most studious care. For one, I took and furnished that house in Soho.
I know, I've been there.
And here, I announced to my servants that Mr. Hyde was to have unquestioned freedom about my house. And finally, there was my will.
Yes, your will. I just knew there had to be something more behind your actions.
And where others hired men to commit their crimes, I was the first to ever undertake them for his own pleasure. I was the first that could assume an air of genial respectability, and in a trice strip off the facade and spring headlong into the sea of liberty. Think of it, Utterson. I did not even exist. All I had to do was mix and swallow the draught, and whatever he'd done, Edward Hyde would disappear, like breath upon a mirror.
But to do what exactly?
The pleasures which I sought in my disguise were perhaps undignified, but I would scarce use a harder term. But in the hands of Edward Hyde, they soon began to turn monstrous.
But Jekyll...
No, I will say no more on the matter.
You speak as though your actions had no consequence. But that was not the case, was it?
I thought so at first, but a careless act of cruelty to a child soon changed that.
You know my cousin, Richard Enfield, witnessed that deed.
And Hyde had to bring him to this very door for a cheque before he would leave.
Ah, yes, the cheque. Drawn in the name of Henry Jekyll and not Hyde.
But that danger was easily eliminated when I found by sloping my own hand backward I had a new signature. I opened an account in the name of Edward Hyde.
I suppose you thought you were safe once more.
But then something happened to change all that. I'd been out for one of my adventures and returned rather late to change back into Jekyll. Although it wasn't until the next morning when I felt something was wrong.
Are you there, sir?
What do you want?
Good morning, sir. I've brought you breakfast. It's kippers this morning, it being Friday and... Oh!
Oh, you clumsy elf! What did you do that for?
Excuse me, I didn't expect... Where exactly is Dr. Jekyll?
The devil do you mean by that?
And just what are you doing sleeping in the master's bed?
Why are you looking at me like that?
Well, I hardly expect to find you here, Mr. Hyde.
Hyde! Hyde! Fetch a mirror!
Here you are.
Dear God, I have changed.
I'll ask you again. Where is Dr. Jekyll?
How should I know?
You're in his bed, aren't you?
And he's given me liberty about this house, hasn't he?
Yes, but
Get out!
I really must protest.
I said get out! Get out and leave me in peace!
Then you had changed.
I changed, and without using the drug, too. And it wasn't the only thing I found. It had become increasingly hard to return to the form of Jekyll. It was as though some kind of resistance had taken hold.
Then the form of Hyde was becoming stronger.
Yes, and I began to see the danger in that. If I were to continue with my experiment, the very balance of my nature might be permanently overthrown.
And you would become Edward Hyde forever?
It was then that I knew I had to choose between the two personalities.
Surely there was no doubt in your mind.
Oh, but there was.
But Henry, you, with all your virtues, how could you ever dream of becoming Hyde?
Hyde would never understand what he had lost, and Hyde would never long for the attribute of Jekyll. Yes, it would have been a carefree life if one dedicated to the baser pleasures.
But as Hyde you would forever be despised and friendless?
And as Jekyll I would suffer the longing fires of abstinence, and yet, for all his faults, I preferred the elderly and discontented doctor surrounded by friends and cherishing honest hopes.
I should hope so, too.
I bade farewell to the pleasures I had enjoyed as Hyde, and for 2 months I was true to my task. For 2 months I led a life of such abstinence.
I remember that period well, and how happy I was to see the change in you.
Have you ever been addicted to something, Utterson? To feel such a yearning that gnaws at your very soul?
No, I can't say I have.
I began to be tortured with such longings that at last, in an hour of moral weakness, I once again compounded and swallowed the transforming draught. That night I was punished. Dear God, how I was punished.
How so?
My devil, who's been caged for so long, came out roaring. I was conscious, even when I took the draught, of a more unbridled, a more furious desire to do ill to mankind.
Was that the night Sir Danvers Cardew died?
Heaven help me, Utterson. I have blood on my hands.
You need a drink.
Over in the cabinet, on the side, you should find some brandy. And there's a powder on the side. And a grain or two, won't you? It'll help steady my nerves. Thank you.
So what happened after Sir Danvers died?
I did all I could to redeem my past. You know yourself how tirelessly I worked in the last months of the year.
You did much good in that time.
Yes, and those days, they passed quietly for me. Almost happily, even. You recall how I took to taking a walk around Regent's Park?
I do indeed. I even commended you on the benefits.
Well, after one winter morning stroll, I sat down on a bench to enjoy what little warmth the sunlight held. Ah, it felt good to be alive on such a day.
Come on, boy.
That's a fine dog you have there, madam.
So he is, sir. Even though he has a mind of his own at times.
And such a fine day for a walk, isn't it?
I do enjoy the mornings like this, before everyone has woken up, and it's so peaceful and quiet.
It's sometimes hard to believe we're in the heart of the city.
Come here, boy. Come here and meet the nice gentleman.
Hello there, boy. Come to say hello, have we?
Oh, I do apologize, sir. He's never behaved like this before.
It's quite all right. As you say, sometimes dogs have a mind of their own.
I'm sorry, sir. He seems to have taken a dislike to you.
Perhaps you should take him away.
I'm trying.
Say, get him off me!
I'm doing my best, sir.
Ah, the devil, he bit me!
Sir, I do apologize.
I'll teach you to bite me!
Sir, there was no call for that. It was only a nip he gave you.
Only a nip. I'll teach you some manners!
Dear God, your face. What kind of man are you? Get away from me. Do you hear? Get away!
And you'd change then and there.
I remember looking down at my hands. They were rough and hairy and clenched with such fury. Yes, Utterson, in the blink of an eye, I had turned from a respectable, well-loved man into the most hated beast in all of London.
As Edward Hyde, you were Wanted by the police.
And where Jekyll might have crumbled, Hyde rose to the challenge. My drugs were here, in this laboratory. But how was I to reach them? If I returned here as Hyde, my own servants would consign me to the gallows.
I fear I know the answer to your fix.
Where else could I have turned but to Lanyon?
So you wrote him, requesting that he obtain the drugs on your behalf.
I shall never forget the terror of that day. I went from bar to bar trying to conceal my face. And when one drunkard made the mistake of commenting on my ill-fitting clothes, Hyde struck him with a devilish fury.
In spite of the chance of arrest.
Hyde, in danger of his life, was a creature new to me. He shook me with an anger and lusted to inflict pain wherever he could.
And it was in this frame of mind that he made his way to Lanyon's.
Lanyon never should have seen the change. He didn't need to know the true horror of it all. But Hyde goaded him and baited him to watch. Oh, he knew what he was doing. Have no doubt in your mind.
Lanyon never told me, you know. After all that had happened, he still couldn't bring himself to betray you.
At night, when I returned as Jekyll, a new terror had come upon me. It was no longer the gallows I fear. It was the horror of turning into Hyde. And my respite didn't last for long. Next morning I was seized with those indescribable sensations that heralded the change. I only just made the shelter of my laboratory before I was once again that raging and ferocious monster.
You'd lost all control.
It took a double dose to return me to myself, but my relief was short-lived. 6 hours later, the pangs returned. Now do you understand why I felt the need to confine myself?
My dear Henry, I never could have guessed.
Even now, it's only under the stimulation of the drug that I'm able to wear the countenance of Jekyll.
Then Edward Hyde is truly taken over.
At any time, I could be taken with that premonitory shudder, and if I sleep, or even doze for a moment, it will be Hyde that awakens.
If only I'd known when I saw you that day with my cousin.
The powers of Hyde have grown with the sickliness of Jekyll. Oh, how he hates me. He leaves me letters in my own hand, berating my cowardliness. He even burnt the portrait of my father.
You don't think he'll harm you, do you?
No. He fears death more than he hates me. You know, I almost pity him.
But why?
He's scared, Utterson. Terrified I shall destroy him by suicide.
Henry, you wouldn't.
I have come to a crossroads. Once it may have been possible for me to conceive of a life of torment. Indeed, my punishment might have gone on for years.
Might have.
Final calamity has befallen me. I've no more of the drug, you see. It's all gone.
Then surely the solution is simple. You must make some more.
If I only could.
Then if Hyde won't let you, you must explain the method to me.
No, my dear friend. You don't understand me. It's not Hyde who blocks my progress. It's the chemist shops of London.
How so?
There is a salt, quite essential to my formula. I sent out for a fresh supply some time ago, but when I came to use it, there was no effect. It's quite impure. Believe me, I've tried to find more, and Poole has done his best for me.
Just how much have you got?
Of the old? I used my very last tincture before you broke in.
Then the next time you change, you will become Edward Hyde forever.
No, do not fear. I shall never let that happen.
You won't?
Now you must think as my lawyer, friend Utterson, and protect my reputation.
I've always sought to do my best for you, you know that.
The authorities, when they arrive, they must find Jekyll's body here, not Edward Hyde's. You see that, don't you?
But Henry...
And my journal. You must take it with you.
What do you want me to do with it?
Destroy it. No one should ever follow in my footsteps. No one should ever endure what I have suffered.
I'm sorry, Henry, but I can't let you do this. I can't let you kill yourself.
It's too late to stop me.
What do you mean by that?
That powder you poured into my brandy. It wasn't a sedative, I'm afraid.
Then, how long have you got?
It's near, Utterson. So very near.
Henry. Henry.
yes, Doctor, this way.
Henry, may God have mercy on your soul.
You have been listening to Robert Louis Stevenson's Dr. Jekyll and Mr Hyde, starring Jerry Robbins as Dr. Henry Jekyll, J.T. Turner as Mr. Utterson, and James Tallock as Dr. Hasty Lanyon, with Dennis Cordell as Richard Enfield, and Joseph Zamparelli as Poole. Featured were Kate DeSisto, Ronnie Marshak, David Alt, and Sam Donato. Executive producer Mark Vanderberg. Dramatized for radio by Gareth Tilley from the novel by Robert Louis Stevenson. Music by Tom Stitzer. Produced by M.J. Cogburn. And directed by Jerry Robbins. For the Colonial Radio Theatre on the air, this is David Alt speaking.
This has been a production of the Colonial Radio Theatre on Brilliance Audio. For further information concerning this program or other Brilliance Audio titles, please call the following toll-free number, 1-800-222-3225, or visit our website at brillianceaudio.com. No part of this recording may be played for an audience or reproduced in any form. It may not be streamed, downloaded, broadcast, or copied without written permission. Address all inquiries to Brilliance Audio, P.O. Box 887, Grand Haven, Michigan, 49417.